Welcome to Aspects of Writing with your host, James Kelly. Now, let's get writing. Here's your host, James Kelly.
Hello and welcome to Aspects of Writing. I'm your host, James Kelly, and my guest today is we have Eric McConnell and Craig Parnell? Parry. Okay, I always get names wrong. Always.
You're not alone.
So you have a new book come out. We've already interviewed you in the past about young Noah. So, Eric, why don't you tell us a little bit about this book? You're the illustrator, or
I'm the author-illustrator.
You do both.
I do both. My partner Craig is a therapist, and he comes up with ideas and concepts, and then I actually write the manuscript and do the editing, and then also the illustrating.
Have you done that with other books other than just Young Noah?
No, just the Youngnoadventures series.
Okay.
I came to him about in the 90s, actually, with this idea.
Eons ago.
Because he does the storyboards.
Yeah.
And he writes the story, basically.
Yeah.
So it was a natural fit for both of us.
Okay. All right. Well, that's cool. So what is this book about?
This book is dealing with a sensitive topic, actually two of them. The setting is in the ancient world. It's Noah, again, imagined as a young boy, Noah from Noah in the Ark. He already has a natural gifting for understanding troubled animals. They don't speak in English, but he can understand them. And this particular book deals with the topic of divorce and also the topic of body image and coping with pain and overeating and the whole emotional dynamic that goes with going through divorce. So
yeah, Craig, you were showing me a little bit of this before we went on air, and it's interesting too because you actually show a character who eats too much because of this whole situation. I think, is it an antelope or what is that character?
Gaby, or otherwise known as Gabrielle, is a gazelle.
A gazelle, okay.
A sweet, beautiful, sensitive little animal that is, when the story picks up, her parents are at the very end of their relationship, their marriage. She's coping the only way that she knows how. She's extremely depressed. She isolates. She hoards all this tropical fruit, and she withdraws from her friends, and she begins just to gorge, to try to stuff the emotional pain and the feelings because it's too much for her to process.
How does Noah fit into this?
Noah fits in at a crisis moment when her life is in danger. And
we're talking about the young Noah.
We're talking about the young Noah. Young Noah is a boy who happens upon a situation where her life is in danger, and he and his pal Bronny, the little female brontosaurus, they run interference and literally save her life. That's how they're introduced to Gaby. And they learn of what's going on with her through a series of events in the book and her home life, and the story unfolds.
So, Craig, when Eric's writing and illustrating, do you have influence in that? Like, do you say, can we do this?
What times I'll do is I'll write an outline with ideas, and then he'll read it, and then we'll sit and we'll play with it. We'll bounce it back and forth in a brainstorming way. And then when we come to an agreement what we're going to tackle, he starts going, and then the creative process that Eric has, the brilliance of what he does, because he's been doing it for so long, just takes over. And like in this particular situation, when a child is 1 through, or actually 2 or 3 to 6 or 7, they're very egocentric. They're very, what did I do wrong to cause this problem? They don't have the capacity yet to understand it's not their problem. They didn't do it. They didn't have anything to do with this. So this animal is stuffing themselves because something's eating them on the inside. That they're like, what did I do wrong to cause this?
Right.
And that's where a lot of children struggle with depression and sadness, and it becomes a long life battle with these issues because they get stuck emotionally because they're traumatized through this process. So he tackles that in the book because as you read the end of it in chapter 7 and 8, there's 8 chapters.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you. The last book, was it in chapters?
It did have chapters.
But as long as this, though?
Not quite as long.
Okay.
This kind of breaks the mold of a typical children's book.
Yeah.
Most children's books, they're anywhere between 15 and 20 some odd pages. This is a little bit different. It has a story arc. It has a beginning and a middle and an end, but it kind of needs that to tell the story that needs to be told.
But the way you broke it up, though, is great because if a child wants to be read to at night, you can read chapter 1. The next night you can read chapter 2. So in that way of storytelling, it isn't that bad. Because I know I write children's books as well, and they always say you never want anything that's too long. I wrote one that's 42 pages, and I was criticized, that's too long a book. You're not going to get their, keep their attention. But when you break it up into chapters the way you did, that makes sense to me.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I kind of needed to. I felt that to try and take a story this complex and this delicate that needed to be, it needed that length to kind of be told properly. It needed to be divided up into chapters.
Yeah.
And
well, you couldn't tell it all at one sitting.
No, there was no way. It would be overwhelming. And so because the content is dealing with, modern real-life challenges, though it's placed in an ancient world setting, yet the problem is almost like a universal problem that is, could be relatable to modern day. And the animal is a safe little identifiable animal that the child can relate to. So.
Yeah, and I think that's what you're trying to accomplish with your book too. Is because how do you talk to children about what this topic matter is? It's a very difficult thing to do, and you are right. Most children who go through some kind of a divorce or a situation like that, they always put the blame on themselves.
Correct.
Because the parents don't talk to them and tell them they can't really. Sometimes you can't divulge what all is going on in the relationship, and you want to hide it from the child. So of course, if you're not paying attention to what that child's thinking or going through, they're going to always put the blame on themselves.
Yeah, they're going to they're going to fill in the gap, and it might not be rational. It's just, and if they're always looking at that age, they're not developed enough to do that. That's why these books are so monumental, because they allow the parent to communicate to the child what maybe they might have difficulty know where to begin with, and articulate. Give them an understanding of what's really they're going through. That's what these books are designed to do.
You know what this would be great for is someone who's literally getting ready to go through a divorce before the divorce has happened, so that they can understand that this is why I want you to understand this isn't about you. Correct. I don't want you to feel guilty here.
That's it.
But we have to do this, so just understand, don't fall into this pattern. I think that would be great for someone going through a divorce.
Well, that's one of the things that I've desired, is one day these will be in the hands of therapists, counselors, social workers, people who deal with family issues, so they could articulate this and communicate it in a way. Where do you begin? How do I know how sensitive I need to be to you?
Right.
Where the book does that for you.
Right. It actually takes over. That's a great thing, by the way, what you said about getting that in the therapist office. So I want to ask you, gentlemen, a little bit about your background. I know we talked about it last time you were on the show, but Eric, give us some of your background.
Well, I've worked in the animation field as a storyboard artist for 25 years. Most of the major studios, and my career really began with Warner Brothers back in the 90s. My first storyboarding job was on a show called Pinky and the Brain. A lot of people may remember that show. It was a Steven Spielberg animated series, and the writing was just hysterically funny, which is what I think made it such a success. It went 4 seasons. Most animated series go 1 or 2.
Yeah.
But I've worked on that. Most of the stuff I worked on is somewhat obscure, but also did a few seasons of Curious George. with Universal. Worked on some Disney shows. Worked on Muppet Babies. That was the most recent. And a lot of stuff in between. Iron Man animated series back in the 90s. So, yeah, it's been quite a lot.
An interesting career.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yes, it's been really interesting.
Yeah. And Craig?
And that's one of the things that I desired for my friend here, is that get him from behind the scenes out to the public to see how amazing this guy is.
Yeah.
As you'll read the books, you'll see that.
Yeah.
My background, I met Eric about 30 years ago out in L.A. when I was out there, and with a few other friends. And I saw this talent in him, and I was just like, oh, my gosh. And that's why I get so excited when I see what he does. My background, obviously, is like a salesman. I have salesman personality. But I became a counselor later on in life. And because of my faith, I always liked to help people. And even when I was in sales, people would sit down and tell me their problems. And I cared more about helping them their problems than making money in sales.
Sale, yeah.
And then one day a friend said, you've got to go to grad school. And because I had so many issues as a child with learning disabilities and being dyslexic and all these things, that I shied away from anything academia, though I read constantly. But anything in this, academic world, that was not my friendly place. And it was my journey, spiritually as well as emotional growth, that developed becoming like, I'm a natural to be a counselor because of all the stuff I've gone through. I can see people, I can read them like in a heartbeat. And people go, well, how did you do that? I don't know how I did it, but answer the question, why is this? And they go, why are you asking that question? And I said, I don't know, but answer the question. And then I find out that was the issue that they were struggling with. And then just people to this day come up to me wherever we go and tell me about their problems, and I'll sit there and try to help them.
I find something that's interesting that you're just now talking about, in that sometimes we just have a natural gift.
Yes.
We were talking about something we were doing earlier, and how did someone do that? And sometimes it just comes to you. You don't have to have the training necessarily. Just let it happen.
Yes.
And you're just being able to talk to people. It's just a gift, really. And maybe with your illustrations, it's the same thing. That's just a gift. I cannot draw like that. I mean, I've tried.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I mean, to this day, I've just got to be completely honest. Drawing is not easy.
No.
I have to put in practice. I try to practice, if not every day, like every other day. It's like playing a musical instrument. I got good enough to work professionally, but it did take a lot of hard work, and it's still.
So did you go to graphic art school?
Yes, I went through art school, although it was a fine art background. But like Craig, I did a bunch of stuff before actually getting into animation because I just simply thought that I didn't have enough talent to work at that level. And through a series of less than fulfilling careers, it was finally made clear to me, also as someone with deep faith, as a Christian, that that's not what I was put on earth to do. And so it took me a couple of years of taking classes at the Animation Guild and other, training to learn the craft of animation, to get out there, to hustle, to show my portfolio around. And it led to a job my first job was in 1992. So it did pay off, but it was tough.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of lessons here, not just within your book, but just about life in general, is follow your path. Go with what your heart desires. We always have to sustain life. We always have to do something we may not want to.
Right.
But that doesn't mean give up on what you want to do as well. And even though you are not a writer necessarily or an illustrator, you had the insight to say, well, let me find someone who can do this. And you saw a talent in Eric.
that was hidden.
That was hidden.
Needed to be exposed. This genius. And like when I was, you saw I was a counselor before I was a counselor, probably.
Oh, yeah.
And I was going through a really bad breakup of an engagement. And I was a mess. And I was talking to ministers and rabbis, and let me take you out to lunch. And I'm like, oh, good, you'll finally help me. And they'd sit there and tell me their problems. And I'm scratching my head, and I go, I'm an emotional mess. I'm ready to be, and what's wrong with this picture? And then I was running the men's ministry, and I was doing this and that. And it just became a niche for me. And one of the greatest things that helped me, that I want these books to do, is I'm a cognitive therapist, and that's the kind of person who believes that, yes, bad things happen to us, but it's not what happens to us. It's what we tell ourselves it means, creates the feelings and emotions that we get stuck with. And the ability to uncouch those ideas of why I feel the way I do, why I look at the world I do, why I use the filter I do, that's what either sets me free or I stay stuck. And that's what these books are going to do for children, for adults. They're going to be able to articulate things they could never articulate to their kids because they wouldn't know where to begin with. So the cartoon, the animation does it for you.
Yeah.
And then it starts a dialogue on its own that the parent can have or the therapist can have with the child.
Well, and it's teaching them to don't take this with you. This is just one hump in the whole realm of life.
Yes.
And you'll get past this. So
yeah, the first one is about a prosthesis a child has. The animal has, and I'm sorry.
Lamb's tail.
It's how many kids go through that?
Right.
And then they become, it's got to get the book to see what I'm talking about. But there's a plug. But
well, and there's a lot of hidden illnesses that we don't even see or know about too. Mm-hmm. So that might be another book to go with next time. Because I actually have a friend who has a prosthetic eye, but I never knew she was blind in that eye ever. Mm-hmm. Actually, when she told me that, I thought it was the other eye. Because they do such a good job now, I'm thinking, and she goes, no, it's this eye.
Well, Eric, he jokes with me because I come up with these ideas, and he says, Craig, you've got me locked up for 7 years with all these ideas. I have this idea for a dysfunctional family that's really hilarious. We won't share it now, but
is it with the Young Noah series?
Oh yeah, they're all Young Noah.
Wow,
I have all these ideas, so I would write. Matter of fact, one of the ideas that I was writing, I was in the emergency room of a hospital, and I was sitting there for hours, and I sat there with my iPhone and just put out these ideas, and I sent it to him, and he's like, oh no, another book.
Yeah.
So it paid to go to the emergency room.
No, I wouldn't. I just used the
He's
time
got me
effectively.
locked up
for 7 years.
For 7 years.
Yeah, that's amazing. One of the things I pointed out why you have the concept and then he creates and makes it happen is I think a lot of people who want to write something, all the time, at least once or twice a week, someone comes to me and says, I have an idea for a book, but I don't know how to do it. And I think the thing is there's a way of always doing something. Whether it's you start it yourself, just write the idea down, find someone else to help create it, or don't be afraid to tackle it yourself either. And I think we oftentimes put this wall up, this barrier up that says I can't do this because I don't have a journalistic background or I don't have a degree. And you don't always have to have a degree. You just have to have the idea and start writing it, get it on paper. You'll find a way, if you really want to, you'll find a way to get it out there. And I always encourage people, even if you're not going to do it to go out there for the general public to have, do it for yourself. If nothing else, to show that accomplishment. Because that's an accomplishment. Anytime you write anything and put it down, and especially if you get it published, even if it's just going to family and friends, that's a major accomplishment. I know we're going to do far more than that with Young Noah. I understand that. But, this show is about encouraging people to go out there and find their passion and go through with it. And it isn't just about the writing when it comes to children's stories. It is about the illustrations as well. So I think that's important to understand. There's a lot of elements that are involved into writing a book. It isn't just coming up with the idea.
But what's interesting is, Eric, you should share why this book was so long to write.
How long did it take to write this book?
From beginning to end, 6 to 7 months.
But that's not a long time, really.
I disappeared.
He's not available. He's
For the whole thing, you were just like
the
shut
writing
yourself off.
actually, because I knew what I wanted to say, was the easiest part. That was done relatively quickly. The illustrating, because every single page is illustrated. It's double spread. It's eye candy, And I want it to be that because that's important. I think for a kid to really be engaged with the story.
you can see the intonation on the animals. It's not just a simple.
You're brought into that world.
Well, this is a deep subject. This is really,
Yeah, and that was one of the time elements, was communicating the emotion through the characters for stuff that, it's one end of the spectrum to the other with this, and having to navigate a family breakup in illustration, step by step by step. It was not easy. It's funny because about 3/4 of the way through the illustrating process, it hit me like a truck. And honestly, I don't think it was meant for me to realize this until that point. But I broke down because I realized this is my childhood. This is autobiographical.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, I made it a female character, Gaby, the gazelle. The other two characters in the previous Young Noah books were male, and I wanted a female character. But essentially, the storyline was taken as a script right from my childhood. So what you see this character go through in the book is exactly what I went through as a kid.
I think what's important here is, because I'm, I also grew up in a family of divorce, but I was older. And it's interesting how I have two little brothers who saw the entire divorce situation completely different. And younger children seem to, that's why this is great for younger children, because they do see it completely different, and they do take on more of the burden of what happened here. Like, what did I do? How come this happened? Or they'll blame one parent over the other, like, why did you do that? Why did you leave dad? Or why did you leave mom? And, I think this maybe will help them understand it's not about what mom did or what dad did. It's just we don't get along, and we have to move on for the sake of the family. And I think that's what the dynamics today are different than it used to be. It used to be when you got married, you stayed married no matter what throughout life. And for some people that did work. But I also know from my own personal experience on someone that I'm related to, how that can affect you. When two people stay together just for the sake of that's the way it has to be because you took those vows, that can also be toxic. If you're not getting along and you grow up with that, that can be just as toxic as divorce itself. So knowing how to delicately handle this and get kids through divorce and make them understand it's not necessarily a bad thing, mom and dad just didn't get along, to me, that's better than staying in a marriage that you're just in it because of you took those vows and that's what you believe has to happen.
Yeah. And, one thing, too, that I think needed to be addressed is that while I certainly do not advocate the breakup of a marriage at all, sometimes it happens. It seems like in our culture now, with everything that is going on, I don't even want to, that would be a discussion in and of itself, but it happens a lot. It unfortunately, the way things are in our world right now, it puts a lot of pressure and stress on people committing and staying together. And Craig, you made a comment earlier today.
I make a few
about no. But
Which one?
It just came to mind about in marriage you choose somebody. Why don't you say it?
I try to articulate things in a quick manner for people to understand, and then allow them to give it back to me. And when I do marriage counseling or something like that, I said, I hope you understand that you're making a vow to each other you don't know you're making. And they go, what? I said, you're making a vow to each other you know you're not you don't know you're making. Yeah, you're making a vow to get married, they say. I said, yeah, but you're making an unconscious vow to one another you're not aware of. And they go, what's that? You're going to give me the childhood I never had. And they go, oh, I don't believe that. I said, you don't believe that? Well, when you fight, because everyone fights, they have arguments, do you fight like siblings? And they pause for a minute and they look at me. And then they just look at me like from, wow. And see, so you can't give you the childhood you never had, but that's in you because of the damage that was done when you were a child. You have to learn to be an adult. You have to learn to argue and debate as an adult, not like a child. And if you ever watch a lot of these dysfunctional families, they're acting out their childhood. And when they meet, they sometimes confuse intimacy with the intensity of the unwarranted pain that's never been dealt with. And as I tell a lot of couples, usually you marry someone who's the person you had the most difficulty in your family. And they say, why is that? Because at a certain age, you say, I'm not going to do the dance with that person anymore. I'm done with dad or mom or whatever it is. And unconsciously, you seek out somebody and they seek you out. And you initially have this great relationship and then it goes boom. So if you can work through these things, you can have a very stabilized relationship. They can be very strong because the things, you can't celebrate what you don't accept.
You have to recognize the problem.
Yes. And you can't change what you don't recognize.
Right.
So that's where my expertise comes in, because I've seen this so many times. I can't tell you. I remember one time it was this gentleman was having some problems, and he came in to where I was counseling at the time, and he was elated. And I was like, you met someone, didn't you? And he said, yeah, but she's in AA, and you're there for taking care of your drinking problem. Yeah, but she doesn't drink. Oh, she drinks a little bit. You don't meet someone in a recovery center until you take care of yourself. Guess what happened? It didn't work. But it's almost like a heat-seeking missile. You unconsciously seek this person out. You feel this oneness, and what oneness is, it's not oneness. It's the unresolved injury that happened to you as a child that you're associating, and you're going to expect that other person to heal you when you have to learn how to open up and deal with it yourself. Like you said, you have to first acknowledge the problem to change the problem.
That's kind of what you're doing here. Is you're helping these kids recognize that the problem isn't them.
Exactly.
No, it is never them.
Yeah. So that it really plays into what you're saying.
Exactly.
And you're getting them at an early age so that they understand this, so that later on in life they won't have these issues. Deal with it now and understand it now, and then maybe later on in life they won't have that turmoil going on inside. Because you're all right. We're all grown-up children is all we are. That's all we are.
Yeah.
So whatever happens in our past, it goes with us.
Right.
It's how you deal with it is what matters. How you look at it. And do you just say, okay, that was a different person back then, this is me now? Or do you carry that with you? It's still with you. And I do understand what you're saying, that even in relationships, oftentimes we carry those burdens into that relationship when it doesn't even need to be there.
And they become expectations on other people that we cannot live up to because they're unrealistic. They're based on a child having that expectation now manifesting in a relationship. We're different when we're intimate with somebody in a relationship. We're different when we're socially around people, but on that one-on-one, we become who we really are in our core. And sometimes we don't even know ourselves.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah. So this is going to be great, I think. And how did you break up the chapters? I'm just curious as to how did you break up the chapters? There's 8 chapters in there?
Yeah, there's 8 chapters. The storyline is it's pretty seamless, but there were certain little minor junctures where I felt like it needed to have a break, because I always kind of envisioned it as, okay, this is a lengthy story. It's too much to absorb or read at once. So why don't we just take a little break here, for the child or the parent or whoever is reading the book, maybe both at the same time, and then continue on. A lot of it has to do with some of the action sequences, some of the emotional sequences, some of the transition sequences. We get into young Noah and his life at home, which is a fun little miniature story in and of itself, because you get a glimpse into his world and how he developed the wisdom that he has as a kid to understand and have intuition about the problems with animals, because he's had to overcome some of his own. And it's all fun. I mean, there's nothing real heavy. It's just you get to see what his home life, and that's not been represented in the previous two books, so I got into that a little bit in this book.
One of the things that you did I like is that you incorporated the dinosaurs with the animals. Because if we go by evolution and the belief in evolution and how the Earth was started, it's an interesting dynamic there. And I know you're very Christian.
I took a risk.
You're Christian, but you're
yeah.
also, you seem to know a lot about Judaism.
I do.
You know,
I've studied a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I study everything.
So, and I think that's important when we're talking to children, is to make them understand that belief, it doesn't matter what religion, it's just a belief.
These are human dynamics.
You're by,
every day.
So, so I like that. I like that a lot that you did that.
But he fought me on that.
He did?
Oh,
my goodness.
No, he fought me because I'm saying,
It's funny because
this is going to come up, so you have to deal with it.
Well, no, that's the elephant in the living room. I made the decision finally to include this cute little brontosaurus character into Noah's world, because I did some deep investigation into the scripture myself, specifically the book of Genesis and the book of Job.
Right.
And there are references to these massive creatures coexisting with human beings. Now, I know with the evolutionary theories and stuff that's so popular and that's almost accepted as the norm, that would be challenged. And it would be challenged, I think, by a lot of people in the faith community. But again, the foundation of my faith is the Bible. And, I really gave it a lot of serious thought before I decided to go with this direction.
A lot of salesmanship went into this.
Yeah, a lot of
I drew the
hard
picture.
sales.
Remember I sent you that?
It's interesting. When you're a writer, you have to allow your imagination to be free.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2005, I was working on a book with a gentleman who wrote the book in Arabic, and it was called My Journey with the Truth.
Oh,
and we were talking about cultures before we went on air, and that's a culture I didn't know about. He's from Lebanon.
Wow.
And I didn't understand what it was like there, because I only know what I see on the news.
Right.
So you always see these war-torn cities in Beirut or whatever, and the reality of it is you do see that segment of it, but that's not the way it all of it is. True, they do have problems there. But what I didn't know is that there's 800,000 Maronites in Lebanon.
Oh, yes.
And Maronites are a division of the Catholic Church that broke off in the 1500s. Right. So it's really the Catholic Church is what it is. And he wrote his book called My Journey with the Truth in a way that it is Christian, but it isn't. In that, knowing that he wanted to go back there and sell it in a basically Arab country, he had to do it in a way that was spiritual more than religious. I guess that's the best way to say it. Meanwhile, I was working on my book called The Alien Transcripts, Creating God.
The Alien Transcripts.
Creating God.
Again, we're going to have a talk about that one.
Yeah.
That sounds
so
interesting.
he saw my book there that I was working on, the transcript, while I was working on his, because he would come to my house and would write I'd help him with his translations. So he said to me, "What is this book?" And I'm thinking, oh, he's a devout believer in Jesus Christ as God on earth. So I'm thinking, I don't want him to read this. And he said, "Can I take it with me to read?"
Uh-oh.
So I'm telling you this because the idea that you put the dinosaurs in here is not as far-fetched as you think, for a reason. So he took the book with him, and I'm thinking, he's going to come back. I'm going to have to go through this whole lecture, because he studied theology, by the way. He got a degree in theology. So he comes back and he goes, "You have to print this book." And I'm thinking, what? And he goes, "You have to print this book." He said, "You will never sway my Christianity, and you will never sway my belief in Jesus Christ as God on earth. But what you do is you open up the possibilities of what if if just one day you believe, what if? We're all looking for answers in life, and we're all looking for what is creation, is Darwinism, what's correct? But there could be other solutions out there to make both accurate. And he said, that's why you need to print this book.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. I published the book. So I think by having the dinosaur in there is not that far-fetched, because as you mentioned in Genesis, it alludes to dinosaurs. So just allow yourself to have an open mind. Anything we're doing in life, it doesn't mean that you have to believe that is real.
Well, this is the interesting thing. See, in other cultures, the word dinosaur comes in about the 1800s. Before that, they were called dragons.
Yeah.
Right.
So in many cultures, there's hundreds of stories of dragons. We think of dragons like we do Godzilla or whatever because we grew up in modernity. But in the ancient culture, they didn't have a problem with it. The word dinosaur was just created in the 1800s.
Right. So, and I think in the Bible, there's a lot of translations like that we're talking about. I think what people don't understand is we as human beings, we'll take a script, for instance, and we'll translate that into what we see or what we believe.
Yes.
Well, the scripture's the same way. Even if it's at the hand of God, someone translated that.
Mm-hmm.
Someone put that into text.
Correct.
That we see today. The King James Version of the Bible comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's, if you just allow yourself to understand that what is the true meaning here? We don't really have a true concept. We only know what we're taught. And I don't know if I'm making any sense there or not.
You are, but it's I do a lot with apologetics, so especially from a psychological point of view. If there is a God, and he's, Jesus said God is spirit, okay, but he came in the flesh. That's what we believe. God became man. But if there is a God, why did he cause himself to be known as a father? What do we know about the importance of a father in society? The father gives the seal of approval on a child. How many children are out there searching for that seal of approval they're never going to get because that dad wasn't there? Mom will love you unconditionally. Mom will come visit you in prison if you're an axe murderer, but dad won't. So there's so much amazing emphasis in that, in a psychological component. That's what I draw. I see things psychologically all the time. I drive people crazy, but that's what I do. It's automatic to me, and I see when these pieces are missing what it does to a person.
Mm-hmm.
I had to get those pieces for myself. I don't believe in a religion. I believe in a relationship that I have with a living being.
Well, and that's the alien transcript. That's what it alluded to, and that's what he liked.
Yeah.
It's that I didn't make it a human being. Because oftentimes when we say God, people picture a man in a beard.
Yes.
Instead of in my book, I alluded to a being, something greater than all of us, beyond imagination, really,
right.
That created us. It's the hand of God, but what was that hand? What was that being? And so that's why he liked it. So based on what he was saying and his encouragement, I did put that book out. But I'm not here to sell my book. I'm here to sell your book.
I want to hear more about it.
No,
Young Noah.
No, it all connects though.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why I love the dinosaur there.
Yeah, me
because
too.
you're really going against the norm. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with it. I actually think that's a great thing.
And she's cute.
And kids
cute.
love
And
dinosaurs.
Oh my gosh, is she cute?
And we know dinosaurs existed. I mean,
they did. The whole issue is the timing and the time period of their existence. And again, it took me a while, but the ancient world, according to the biblical worldview and the biblical narrative, the ancient world was radically different from the world that we live in now, before the flood.
Mm-hmm.
And I happen to believe that there's worldwide geological evidence supporting the fact of a deluge that covered the earth. And until that catastrophic event, it was a radically different world. We had a vapor canopy around the world, and there were creatures that lived according to the scripture, again, that coexisted with man. Mm-hmm. And if you read, I think it's the 40th and the 41st chapters of Job, there's very detailed description of that. And so I finally thought, I'm not the creator. He is. I'm going to go with what I have been shown. At the same time, I think it's a really interesting addition to the story that will make it unique. It's going to rattle some people, and I may take some flack and some heat for it, but I would just encourage those people to go investigate the scripture for themselves and arrive at their own, conclusion. But
and
in the
she's
meantime,
really cute.
and she's really cute, and
she is cute.
And when the stuffed animals come out, everybody's going to
Yes.
want a little brawny.
Yes.
And I like the idea that you did the young Noah. We always think of Noah as being this
This
ancient
old
man,
guy.
right? Yeah. I love the young Noah. It's just a fun book, and that's what
That's
I like.
what it is.
I mean, it's a
Yeah.
serious-minded book, but at the same time, you make it fun.
Yeah.
And that's what
Yeah.
you have to do.
It's not all heavy. I mean, it.
artwork's
If you look at the cover, I mean, it looks all happy, and it is. And there's there's adventure, there's fun, there's a lot of cute stuff.
But there's a play on words here that I kind of find interesting. You've got a dinosaur looking at Gaby saying, "What's Gaby eating?" And then you're thinking, is the dinosaur going to eat Gaby?
Well, when you see the first book, you see how he met her.
Mm-hmm.
When he's talking to God, he hears a voice, and he looks up, and there's Bronny eating in the branches, and starts communicating with Noah. And she says, "I have a different perspective than you do of these situations," because she's high, and that's what it is. We're talking about.
It is about
it's
perspective,
a perspective, really. There's always another. My profession. We always say there's my opinion, your opinion, and then there's the truth, and that's
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, we're going to wrap this up,
Yes.
but we'll have to do another show. I'm going to give you a copy of my book to take with you, by the way.
I'd love to have one. Yes.
Don't be too critical. But anyway, we'll have to have you back again. I know you have more in this series
Yes.
coming near in the future.
More coming in the future. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
we're hashing that one out now.
You really have an endless amount of subjects here, really, when you talk, when you're thinking about it, when it comes to teaching these children, and especially incorporating, Christianity or religion in general into the books. I do believe that a child always needs to find some faith. I'm agnostic, by the way. A lot of people confuse that with
really?
atheism. Yeah, right. There's atheist and then there's agnostic, and I don't ever think there's a real true atheist out there. Everyone I've met that told me they're atheist, I always find a flaw in that somewhere. I believe there's always belief in something, that we all have belief. Yeah. And I think that's part of what you're teaching children here is you've got to have some faith. You've got to believe in something. You have to have that.
Well, it's what gets us out of bed in the morning.
It is. Without it, it's really difficult.
Yeah.
Well, Jesus said, "Come, you got to come to Him, even as an adult, like a child. You have to have faith, and faith is the evidence of things not seen but hoped for." So, but the biggest problem people have is they get so caught up in their belief that they don't have an authentic self. They have just this belief that they have to protect.
So it's convoluted. You really create a world that you can't even imagine beyond if you're thinking it in that way.
Well, we do it. I mean, look, I'm a Niner fan. You're a Packer fan, maybe. We're not going to come to an agreement. We're going to argue who has a better player because of my paradigm of how I see things. But the reality is, when you watch about how their lives were similar, you might like them both. It's your how your schemata, how you look at things, how you create things in your mind, your image, and that's why you keep saying you got to have that if then what then. That's what made Einstein, because he said you can't do that. And he says if then what then.
Right, exactly. All right, so Eric, where can we learn more about your work in the book?
Youngnoadventures.com is the website. You can learn about the Young Noah adventure world. The books, I'm about ready to add that to the website. But the other two books, Lamb's Tale and Eagle Eye, are both on the website, and links directing to Amazon. The books are on sale on Amazon as hardcover. I'm in the process now of trying to get this into an ebook format. Youngnoadventures.com.
Okay. And Craig?
And the first book we did was in a digital form on the Nook through Barnes & Noble.
Okay.
It wasn't on Amazon, but you can go to Amazon and get them.
So, but they're all in hardback or
The
paperback.
hardback,
They're
but,
hardback.
yeah.
Yeah. Who did you go through with the hardback Because I know you can do it through Amazon now, but there was a time when you couldn't.
I'm self-published, and I've for all three of them, I've gone with Ingram Spark.
Okay.
And they make a quality product, and it's all automated though, so really have to kind of have everything all ready to go when you end up self-publishing the final.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, James.
And to learn more about the show, just go to allaspectsradionetwork.com. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Aspects of Writing. We hope you will join us next week as we discuss every aspect of the writing industry. Until then, if you can dream it, you can write it.